Hello and welcome everyone to 620 Jones Street for a special event and fireside chat hosted by Ramp and the folks at This Week in FinTech. Thank you all for choosing to spend your crowded tech week Wednesday evening with us, the folks at Ramp and This Week in FinTech. Before we start, I'd like to give a quick thank you for our event hosts, bartenders, chefs, staff, and the great folks at Ramp not named Nick, mostly Kristen and Mamie, who helped put this event together. So today's chat will be recorded for the This Month in FinTech podcast, a monthly podcast from the hosts at This Week in FinTech. This Week in FinTech is one of the world's largest tech communities with over 120,000 subscribers worldwide, where we try and keep pace with global innovation in FinTech. Please be quiet during the duration of this interview where as possible. This is a hot mic. It will pick up side conversations, gossip, and then shared live with all of your FinTech friends across the industry. So quiet. We'll leave time at the end for audience Q&A, so please think of questions throughout that you want to ask Nick, and then you can also find us after the happy hour. And all right, let's get started. So today we're joined by Nick Koblov, head of engineering at Ramp. I'd hope you all are familiar with Ramp by now, and I'm sure many of you here work there. But Ramp is the ultimate platform for modern finance teams, combining corporate cards with travel, expense management, bill pay, procurement, accounting automation, and a lot more. Ramp's all-in-one solution is designed to help customers save their most valuable resources, time and money. And even just before this, Nick name-dropped a wine vineyard, a defense tech company, and a couple others as Ramp customers, so they are truly everywhere. And now to Nick. He's been in finance and tech for over 20 years, has established himself as a leader in the field. Prior to joining Ramp in January 2020, he was head of bank and new markets engineering at a firm, and before that had a long run at Goldman Sachs across many parts of the organizations. Nick holds degrees in computer science and physics. I do not. And then at Ramp, Nick plays a critical role in developing the innovative solutions we all see today as head of engineering. So Nick, I have to ask, you're at the top of your game at Goldman in 2016, make a timely jump to join this guy, Max Levchin, at a firm in 2016, ride the wave, and that is January 2020. We're on kind of the precipice of FinTech mania. You probably had your pick of the litter. What initially drew you to Ramp so early in its journey?
Thank you so much, Ryan. First of all, thanks everybody for coming. So excited to see you guys here. Thanks for welcoming me back to SF. I spent very happy 3 years of my life working with Max, Libor, and a few of ex-affirmers are sprinkled here through the audience as well. Yeah, that was a crazy time. I bumped into Kareem by chance in the village, and I learned, so building a corporate credit card wasn't one of the reasons. It was the anti-reason. I initially was very questionable about what can you do in the world of corporate finance and spend. I was very skeptical. What sort of spiked my interest is the fact that about 8 months into the existence of the company, they had parity with all the major competitors in the credit card, in the spend management. I was blown away. There was Kareem pulling out the card at our first lunch and paying for lunch. I was like, what? Like, product is live, it's already working. We went into the office. I met the rest of the team. It was incredibly young, very hungry team. And one thing that sort of spiked my interest was their kind of two things. One was an ultimate humility of the product vision. When I asked Eric Lyman why he's building the company, he kind of what he said stuck with me because it is still our DNA to this day. He said, well, we want to help companies spend less. And everything we do at Ramp rotates around this, and if it doesn't save our customers time and money, we simply don't do the work. It's still a guiding principle. It allows us to have almost 1,000 people by now be in the different meetings with different customers and keep that in their mind, that that's our key mission. It was this ultimate focus. When I asked him how we're going to do it, Eric said, I don't know. You hear, that's why we're talking. We're going to figure it out together. I was blown away by the CEO humility, that he literally bringing you in making you a partner and sharing your company not just in number of shares and ISOs granted, but in the ability to make risk-bearing decisions on behalf of the company. From the very early days, engineers did everything from like underwriting, calling customers, doing collections, figuring out fraud, figuring out what the hell happening with macro and micro credit risk during COVID. So this sort of, no job is too small. You're here to build the business, and I mean, it's scary. You got to be ready to literally do everything that the business throws your way. And another thing, probably just different approach to building things. So rethinking the primitives, looking at like simple things like receipts and asking, why do employees need to be engaged in spend management? Some of we can talk about some of our product philosophy, but sort of there's nothing wrong in building better spend management products. It's great. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement. The key difference and sort of contrarianism in Ram's approach is maybe similar to like Elon's algorithm of deleting things, right? So we decided to delete employee spend management because we don't think that's something that employees should be spending their time on. And we can talk about how AI helping us, but that's sort of pushing the envelope harder to, we don't just build in a better version of an existing product, but we're actually going to go and, let's say, instead of competing with Bill.com, actually try to build a B2B e-commerce marketplace, right? It's like, how many people are doing this? It's hard. I'm not sure we're going to succeed yet. It's still a bet, but it's worth focusing on this. So this kind of like ambitious humility, very young team. I was blown away that basically dropouts and former interns have founded the company, but it was very, very scary and energizing. Yep.
That's great, and a noble vision. I think anybody here who has worked at Big Corp and used a certain other expense management product knows how noble this undertaking is by Ramp and how good the product is. So it's been 5 years almost since you joined. So much has happened. We're all trying to keep pace with the rapid innovation and shipping that Ramp has been up to. I'd love if you could give the audience just a sense of where Ramp is in the journey today, maybe some of the volume, customer, et cetera, stats that you can share.
Yeah. Definitely can share specific numbers. Oops. We're still a private company, but can share some of the deltas. So at Ramp, we count time in days. Days makes years, years make lives, we make lives better. So in the past 1,000 days, our product offerings grew by 5x, our team grew by 5x, our customer base grew by 11x, our TPV grew by 22x, and our contribution profit grew by 40x. You might notice that there is a ramp-shaped curve going from 5 to 40, and we like it this way because that literally translates into leverage. For example, 3 years ago, there was no bill pay. It was a joke of a product. We just threw a couple of engineers together to try to see if we can debit one account and credit another account, and it worked, and we started building a product. So that sort of focus on driving the customer value is sort of universal. We think that giving customers time back effectively it's what we do. That's a fairly universal proposition. And then maybe the other thing that's sort of driving that focus, and it translates into the most recent numbers, is again something that we're very early on the journey of, but most of the founders, and I'm sure there's some here, are not finance experts. And it pains me to see companies going and hiring external financial advisors and, companies who think they know what's happening with your books or with your bank accounts or with all the, all the GAAP compliant invoices and receipts that you need to collect. Instead, what we're trying to become is sort of a co-pilot that runs side by side next to a business, and most importantly, automates financial decisions for you. Now, automate cash management decisions, treasury decisions. We think that there's a lot to do there.
So now that we've set the scene for Ramp, I want to jump a little bit more into your role in your organization specifically. So head of engineering at Ramp, what does that role kind of look like? And more importantly, what is the org that you currently supervise?
I kind of treat myself as the bottom of the inverted pyramid. I think I'm actually a support function. The most important people are the leaf nodes who are building things. And my job is to unblock, inspire, push the envelope, and we operate in a pod structure where we have very small teams. It's shocking that we can have like 3-5 people competing with $1 billion public company, but the small size of the team and the outsized surface area is, I think, what allows us to scale. That's how we operated. When I joined, I was engineer number 8. There was less than 20 people in the company about 4.5 years ago. And my main function, I obsess over how do we keep this culture scaling in sort of this cellular fashion, right? Because if we're going to try to take the cell and scale it to 1,000 people, that's going to break, culture is going to change, we're not going to be as efficient. But how do we make sure that all these cells exist, that these pockets of innovation happening independently? So we do it by creating vertical teams, giving them just insane amount of ownership. We don't prescribe from the top what the engineer should build. We set goals like we have to do X million dollars of CP by the end of the year, and let's say 20% of that CP needs to come from, non-interchange. Like, because we're trying to diversify our sources of revenue, that's it. Then everybody goes do their homework and figure out what products is it going to translate. Are we going to introduce, we're going to start charging for software because that's what we do, that's what we're great at, or is there transactional value that we can add to allow US businesses to transact in 180 countries and 85 currencies, right? And there's a way to monetize that. How do we actually reach those goals? What I really like about Ramp structure is that our goals sort of drive how the teams are aligned. I think that's the key to success. Some of the things that break when you do this way is how do you push something horizontal through the company? So you want to do a software upgrade, or you want to introduce a new framework, and now all of a sudden 15 or 20 different teams need to do it. So that requires, that part of my job is to be very hands-on when this happens, because how do you approach, let's say, our spend management team, who's engineering manager somewhere hiding here, and say, hey, Jeff, let's do this upgrade for, we have this entitlements framework that we built, fantastic. Drop everything that you do, please help me do that. True story. The reality, in order to make that happen, your senior leadership needs to be committed and bought into this, and bought in that your product roadmap will be disrupted. And me, Jeff, and Diego, as heads of engineering, product, and design, I've never seen a more hands-on, annoyingly hands-on leadership, but I think that's important. We have people love, hate us, mostly love, I hope, but we have to stay on top and inspire and get in the weeds and figure out together. If you disengage and you basically just give a marching order and say, okay, you guys figure it out, you're not really going to have street cred as a leader. You need to show that you're in the boat, that you're there to solve the problem. Sometimes the problem that you created yourself, by creating incentives for velocity and then demanding quality from exactly the same team. So I think that's how my day-to-day looks like.
Awesome. That's awesome. And we might have to do a love-hate poll at the end of this interview, see where you stand. All right, so the small team structure that you mentioned, that's probably every founder or head of engineering's dream, right? Nobody wants to be micromanaging. You want to empower great people. But to do that, you have to bring in great talent. And FinTech, AI, software, the Valley is growing a ton, and it's very competitive out there for talent. But still somehow, Ramp has this reputation of a true talent hotbed with the likes of some other real Silicon Valley darlings. How do you go about sourcing, hiring, and then interviewing and bringing on such great engineering talent in a competitive age?
Great question. It's very hard. It's very hard to do. I think probably the key is to look where others don't, It's going to generate a ton of work for you, but and for us, it's generating a ton of work. But we look very young. I was just having a conversation during the happy hour of how young. I was talking to one of the engineers who used to work at my previous company, and he's saying, like, I used to work with the 25-year-olds. I get older, but I still work with 25-year-olds. Somebody mentioned a co-founder of 17 years old. So I think that's the key. There's so much young talent. One of our founding engineers never went to high school and then went to university, spent 2 years, figured out that it's useless, and came to Ramp. One of our most talented payments engineers ran Minecraft servers, and one of the best video game engineers from middle school time never left rural Virginia, and the first time he left it was to come to New York City and become a Ramp engineer. Single-handedly launch international payments, pretty much. So there's some figuring out the sort of weird edge cases where, like, oh, this skill correlates to such attention to detail that I can give so much trust to the person, and then build support structure around them once you hire them. So in terms of sourcing, it's a ton of work, but primarily we again, it's the youngest team, I think, that I've ever had a pleasure of working at. And becoming creative, we maybe within a year, probably going to switch our whole emergent talent pipeline to exclusively be interns converting to full-time. And any deficit is going to be filled in with just raw new grad hiring. Our intern class was 30 engineers last summer. We're going to go to 50 next summer. So a fifth of the engineering organizations are going to be students. We hire college dropouts. We hire freshmen as interns. We hire college dropouts as new grads fairly frequently. We hire a lot of people who want to learn. So, and treat Ramp sort of as a base where they can learn how to operate the company how to build, how to operate without having the ultimate responsibilities, and then leave and start their own. We probably on average spin off about 3 companies a year. We encourage that a lot. And some of these companies come back and actually bring extra value that otherwise, like, we would never prioritize doing X, and then a couple of engineers leave and start this, and it was like, okay, well, now we did prioritize it. So, we had a couple of companies that came back with kind of huge success, and great value added for us. Some of the other thing is the other interesting segment that we look at is failed founders who are very smart, very successful, but for whatever reason it did not work out. That's an incredible pool of talent. You have to obviously be careful. Not every failed founder is a good find, but there's a lot of opportunity out there to partner. We partner with very early stage companies. There's a number of products that our partners built while Ramp grew. And we stay very connected with the early stage kind of pre-seed seed ecosystem, especially operating in the areas that are very adjacent to us. So there's kind of 3 strategies from dropouts to looking at those pools where some companies just can't afford to have a freshman intern. For those who are interested or who are friends, we're going to start taking interns in San Francisco. We just opened an office in June. So next summer is going to be our first local class in SF. So I'm very excited about that.
That's awesome. Two quick questions. One, how did you find this rural Virginia video game microserver guy? And 2, what do you do to test these engineers, especially when there's, we're all familiar with AI co-pilots, coding engines that can probably pass a lot of basic exams that you might have administered a few years ago?
Yeah, well, he actually was referred by the guy who never went to high school. That was his friend. And as he was leaving, he was like, "Don't be sad. I have a friend who's just as good." And so, which is for an early stage company, leaning on the network network-based hiring is very, very important. You kind of want to get a very tight team that you can trust. This just uber trust is very, very important, but then you need to not miss the momentum where you need to change your sourcing strategies. Like, like we can't rely on just getting people through our network. So,
Great. And then looking at the engineering org and how you balance, I know you mentioned this earlier with other parts of the org, product, customer success, and the like. In financial services, and especially when you're running a big platform, at least, working in traditional banks in the past, they're very hesitant to a lot of quick new shipping. It might cause customer confusion. Customer success has to ramp up and expect more calls. Salespeople have to change their pitches. And ramp, I feel like every time I log on to LinkedIn or Twitter, there's a new, huge net new product coming out. So how do you balance maybe the ambition of the engineering and product team with the rest of the org?
It's tough. It's not easy. There's a few hacks. Well, first off, I think the question behind your question, Ryan, is you guys are all about velocity, but how to maintain good UX, good design, and quality. So it's strange, but it actually not in these two things are not in conflict. If you work in very short cycles, you actually validate your UX, your design, and you incrementally build quality. If you spend too much time building quality, you're giving up opportunity. You're giving up opportunity. Opportunity cost becomes very high. You can't really enter. But if you ship scrappy product very fast, we ship somewhere between 50 and 100 times a day. Whereas some of our competitors announced that they ship in once a quarter recently. But we don't ship it all to GA. So we invested a lot, and some of our enterprise customers actually pushed our buttons because we pushed their buttons really. We signed up a first customer with over 10,000 employees, and the first outage had 10,000x fanning on every employee had an issue. So the head of finance got on the phone with me. I was like, Nick, you can't do this anymore. I was like, well, would you like me to slow down? They said no. Like, okay, so then how do we resolve that? And we came up with an idea of a super GA tier where we're testing a lot of things with mid-market and early customers. And then together with our enterprise sales team, we control the gates of when the enterprise customers get their features. We have alpha tiers, beta tiers. We have a channel with every alpha customers. Those customers who are already on ramp or folks who are thinking, let me know. We can sign you up and add you to the channel. You can provide direct, very blunt feedback. The blunter, the better. And engineers have access to our beta self-subscribed tier, so you can click button in the UI and say, I want to be a beta tester. Grew over the past few months from 1,000 to 4,000 customers. So these are customers who say, we will take the pain, we will take the instability, but we want the latest and greatest. And every engineer have access to an incredible pool of people that they can work with, which is just amazing. And building this support framework early goes back to when we're in the stealth mode. When I joined 8 months into since the day of incorporation, really, we had already 50 customers with a very high tolerance for errors. They didn't care. Give me something that works half of the time. It's fine. We'll start using it. So I think that's very important. That's how we maintain velocity. And then the three of us, me, Diego, and Jeff, we very tightly control GA releases. There's a channel where there's a very, very tight template that you need to explain. What is that making you go from a beta to GA? We used to have questions like, well, I've been cooking in beta for 3 weeks. Sounds good. I'm just going to YOLO it. I was like, no, that doesn't cut anymore. It's been long enough in beta, right? Must be good. So we've been very, very intentional on what does it mean to release even to 5% GA. But alpha and beta is a complete chaos. Intentional chaos where we cannot slow down. Our most demanded enterprise customer doesn't want to. They actually said, the reason we picked you is because you're so fast. I was like, well, but then you need to accept the cost. So trade-offs obviously exist, but I think the velocity actually helps us to iterate on the quality faster.
And so we've danced around this topic a little bit over the last 15, 20 minutes, but we have to discuss AI. I want to understand, how did Ramp approach AI, the last year and a half or so as ChatGPT really took over the ecosystem? Where is it being used across the company?
So this was one of the acquisitions that we did at a company called Cohere, which was founded by one Ramp early engineer. And these guys were downloading models pre-OpenAI announcements off of Twitter and then fine-tuning it and trying different things, and even helped us with our first problem, problem that we solved with language models, or really with transformers that do string similarity between merchant names. So Visa network doesn't call the same merchant by the same name. There's like sometimes dozens of names. And it's a hard problem if your product is based on merchant controls. How can I trust my controls if there's no consistency? So we called Yanu and asked him, would you help us? We had no talent internally. Would you help us to solve this problem? He's like, well, you give me some labels. We put ops people, give him 3,000 labels. He trained a few transformers, deployed it, and our heuristic algorithm that we used before, precision increased from that by about 80%. We're like, okay, so this thing really works. What else can we do with it? And then we offered Yanu and Raul, his co-founder, it's like, do you guys want to come over? Because we have a lot of these problems to solve. And we were very lucky by joining Fortis with Cohere team and intentionally creating an applied AI unit that focuses on in-house infrastructure, because a lot of inference needs to be very low latency, so sub 250 milliseconds, faster than the blink of a human eye. There's a lot of infrastructure to build. There's R&D to do. There's keeping track of what's happening. And the approach we've taken with applied AI is to integrate AI functionality vertically into the product. What I mean by that is we did not rename ourselves to ramp.ai. We're still ramp.com. And again, very consistent with our mission, we decided that AI should help us accelerate, for example, deleting employee experience, which is a very hard problem. So in about a year, we rolled out, we replaced all the OCR vendors. That's one of the surprises of how good, especially Sonnet is recently, with reading images and creating new structured JSON. We have a service that you can give it an image, and it gives you basically structured data that you can plug into literally any component at Ramp. We automated underwriting using financial statements, which we occasionally fall back on when we cannot make a credit decision from your bank data or your credit bureau score or accounting data. It parses it perfectly, highlights all the different elements in your financial statement, and tells our risk analysts. So OCR was the first killer use case, and we applied it to receipts and matching transaction to receipts. So you can literally text any image when Ramp tells you you need a receipt, and we'll match it internally across tens of millions of transactions. Was very hard to do before, and we get a little bit of feedback here. But now we want to delete this. So this was great, but we actually don't even want people to take pictures of the receipt. So the final step for this employee experience deletion will be probably Toast integration, that we're just going to get a webhook, and taking pictures of your receipt will be history forever. Matching transactions to your spend limits. We've taken a very sort of contrarian take that we're not going to offer you 1,000 virtual cards to categorize your spend, but we're going to have instead an intelligent spend limit that you can issue for, let's say, my trip to San Francisco, which I shared with everybody who came to this event. And when you swipe your transaction, there's enough language context between the transaction, all the payload that we receive from Visa, and the list of limits that the company have issued me, that I can automatically match it. So you no longer need to say, what is that you spend it on? And the precision of that has been really shocking. It's been working really, really good. Writing memos, also kind of useless if you have enough context. Language models are really great at that. And we recently posted on our engineering blog, encourage you guys to check it out, how an intern and one applied scientist solved GL categorization, which is the most frustrating thing for employees. You swipe your card, and then you get a list of 200 categories that your controller has set up in somewhere deep in NetSuite that you don't have even access to, and you do not understand it. And I'm not a finance expert. Why are you asking this to me in the first place? That's something that we've been grinding on for about a year, and we finally cracked it, and it's working really, really good. So that whole transaction lifecycle end-to-end, from swiping, routing, enriching transaction with a lot of context, and finally filing it so that your finance team doesn't need to chase you at the end of the month, has really actually allowed us to achieve the goal that we knew we wanted to do back in 2019, but AI actually made it happen and accelerated it tremendously.
Nick, I've spent so many damn hours in expense systems in the past. This sounds like a nirvana state for a lot of us in business travelers in the future. So last question before we open it up to Q&A, so start thinking about some Q&A from the audience. You've probably been, actually deploying AI more than most are in the Valley at Ramp. What is maybe one of the most overhyped and then one of the most underhyped technologies that you've used within AI or tools?
Overhyped is just the statement that is going to replace us. No, I think it's just going to make us focus on things that are way more high leverage. Just generally, beware of the .ai companies. It's a bubble. Bubble happens with every new technology, so it's okay. We're going through the bubble. I'm actually very excited in some of the latest language model progress in like neuroscience, and even like Microsoft Aurora just released. It's not a language model, it's a neural net, but it uses physics models in combination with real-time weather data for prediction. It's just mind-blowing what's happening sort of more on the science side of the language models. Things that work, as I said, things that work very well were obviously OCR, multimodal advances, Llama 3.2 release most recently, and I think UC Santa Cruz just ran a billion parameter model on a 13-watt power demand. So it's probably 50x improvement in power efficiency. So I think there's, things that are going to happen over the next year or two is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. So the costs are going to go down. We continuously looking at how much compute and GPU costs we spend in and fine-tuning our models. And we run our own inference in-house. So being cost-conscious, it's very easy to blow the budget, but some of those advancements are really revolutionary in my mind.
All right, and with that, we'll open it up to a couple questions from the crowd. Who's bold enough to go first? All right, come on up here in the front with the Ramp polo, no less. I love it.
Seated, but.
What do you feel are the advantages of going through the intern to hiring process versus going to some of the other competitors or some of the other kind of darling companies and poaching great talent going about that way? Can you talk about how you think about that?
Fantastic question. It's really that you're getting somebody with a clean slate who is not tainted, unburdened by what has been. Sorry, just had to. But that's really, it's actually very appropriate in that case. So probably biggest shock was meeting one of our founding engineers during my interviews. And he asked me what questions I had for him. I said, who built Marketo integration and ERP integration? We already had it like 8 months in. He says, I did it. I was like, where did you learn it? He's like, here. So slope is very important. Intercept of specific, it's a bit of a cliche, but the intercept of specific skills is less important, but the hunger, the ability to learn. And I don't know how to qualify that, but majority engineers at Ramp really can jump on any problem. And that's sort of like no fear of that's real ownership of the company, right? Like, oh, I do this payment platform. That's all I do. I've done a good job, but the product above me doesn't work. Like, I don't know, but I move money really fast, right? So that kind of attitude doesn't exist, and I think this sort of, courage of taking people who might not know anything about finance, I think that's really the biggest advantage. You do need to mix it with industry experts, of course, and those we're trying to get through, partner referrals, VC referrals. We were very lucky, for example, to hire one of the best React experts in the world early, and that helped us shape our own in-house design system, which is co-authored by engineers and designers, which is very rare. And that early unit attracted a lot of experienced React talent and web design talent from the industry to Ramp. To an extent that we had a candidate who said, so works at Ramp. I'm signing the offer right now. I was like, well, so why? Like, I use his libraries every day. I mean, that's phenomenal. These people are at Ramp. So that, talented people hire talented people, and it's a lot of work to manage young talent, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else. It's the most rewarding hard work you can have as a head of engineering.
Awesome. Next up, right here, front center.
Thank you for talking to us today. This was amazing. So I think that hiring is one of the hardest jobs of a founder, and head of engineer is one of the key hires. If I were to look for hiring an engineer like yourself, what qualities should I look for versus the qualities I should look out for? Thank you.
Amazing. I'll probably bring it back to courage in a number of areas. So there's sort of a perception when you grow your career and you go from a job to job, right, that you should be getting higher roles. Well, the reason I'm switching, I can get better pay, and I was, let's say, a staff engineer, and I can be a director in the next role. That couldn't be further from the truth. You should be looking for people who are willing to go from managing 100 people to being NIC and solving the problem again. My personal journey is my every job switch was a step back by several orders of magnitude back to the foundations of what I love to do as an engineer. And Ramp is really the only place where, as my responsibilities grow, I don't feel like I'm in their own field. Like a lot of people tell me that, hey, I became a director of engineering. It's like, I didn't think that's what I'm going to be doing. I didn't think that that's what engineering is, right? And then, you're obviously trying to figure out, okay, would you like to be NIC again? Or, how would you like literally describe me your happy day? And a lot of people struggle with it. And I think being ready whenever, you just need to stay very attuned to yourself, and that's probably the hardest quality to discern, like this kind of self-honesty, and that's where probably the biggest amount of time I spend on hiring manager interview is like, why are you doing this? What does managing people mean to you? Oh, I'd love to do things with other people's hands. I'd love high leverage. I was like, but what do you think you're giving to people as a leader? What's your leadership philosophy? I think that ability to sort of like give everything up for an interesting problem. I spend a lot, as Ryan said, I spent a lot of time at Goldman, and I've been asked multiple times to like grow my footprint. It's like, okay, you've done this, let's grow your team. I was like, I don't need a bigger team. Can you give me the next hardest problem? And I never became a managing director. I left Goldman after so many years, and the reason being is like, I didn't want a kingdom. Goldman had a ton, still has one of the most exciting big financial institutions to this day, has enormous amount of problems, and the reason I stayed there for so long is I just enjoy solving them. So I think the archetype of the engineering leader that you want is ownership, right? That you stepping into this role not to do a particular function, but to basically build this company. My initial title didn't have the name engineering in it. I was a head of risk. I told Kareem he's doing a big mistake and we're going to lose a lot of money. The result of a couple of engineers had, a partner that we manage risk for the first 10 months through COVID, which was very, very stressful because of macro. And we didn't know what's happening with macro. It's like, are the online businesses going to be more successful if people are staying at home? Turns out, yes, but not all of them. But then on the micro level, which one will survive or not? Engineers were doing these decisions. Our losses through COVID was 1 basis point of the total outstanding credit that we underwrote. Our competitors were running at about 100, basically, 100x of that. And it was really scary, but I don't know where else would you find this kind of opportunity. So when you interviewing people, figuring out why they want your particular startup, what attracts them here, I think is very important, and ability for senior people to be humble enough to say, although one of their favorite closing calls was when we rejected one of the senior engineer, it was a staff level engineer, and he managed 30 people in his previous company. And he did well at the interview, we just didn't have a role to manage 30 people. He called me back and said, Nick, I'm really disappointed. Like, why didn't you give me a job? I was like, well, I don't have 30 people for you to manage. Like, who told you I want this? First off, you didn't interview me enough, so he asked for 2 additional interviews. He's like, I'm full stack. I want to do a front-end interview and another back-end interview. Crush both. And I was like, what do you want to do? She's like, I don't know. Looks like your local dev is broken. My onboarding was kind of subpar. That was a few years ago. Would it be okay if I fix it? I was like, are you okay doing this kind of work? He's like, yes. I was like, I think you're a good fit for us. So I think it's hard to find. It's not written in the resume. You need to know how to talk to people. It's a whole other conversation. How do you talk to people that you open them up to be able to be so genuine on the interviews? I think that's where the art of the interviewing is.
Well, thank you. And can we all please give a round of applause for Nick coming out tonight? So thank you, Nick, for spending time with us this evening, sharing all of your insights. Very excited to see what's next from the RAMP team. And to our audience, we appreciate you all sharing your SF Tech Week with us. Thank you for coming out. And with that, we'll end the fireside chat. And please enjoy the refreshments, bar, and food available for you. Thank you.